Today, I'm going to talk about the 15-stroke roll. And if you're someone who's been using rudiments as a vehicle to improve their chops or rebuild where you once were with your playing, then 15-stroke roll is an important roll for you to look at and to learn because it has some musical elements in it, built in, but they're not on the page and they're not often talked about. So today, not only am I going to break down some of those details for you, we're going to break down some of those secrets of how a 15-stroke roll is played, especially if you're putting it into repertoire. All right, so first, a 15-stroke roll has the name because you hit the drum 15 times while you play. And it sounds like this. It could also sound like this. Hear the difference? This is version number 1, version number 2 here. So let's talk about it, let's break it down. Some rules for 15-stroke rolls. Rule number 1 is they're always a left-hand start. Okay, that's how we're going to practice them. You'll probably never see it in repertoire, starting on the right hand. So we'll focus here and put all of our energy there. All right. Number 2, there's 2 different ways to start the roll. We can start it on the E of the beat or on the and of the beat. And those were the 2 different versions that I just played for you. And we'll dig into more of that a little bit. And then third, this roll can have a crescendo to it. Okay, so you can get louder at the end of the roll. Okay, so if we start the roll on the E, it's just straight 16th notes. All right, and I have an exercise to show you that will help with this. So we'll start with the accent, and then we go right into a check pattern, which is what the hands are doing minus the bounces. Okay, and then we'll follow that directly up with the roll version with the bounces, starting on the E of every beat. And it just flows, it's smooth, it's even. You can add a crescendo to each one. It sounds a little bit like this. Here we go. Here's our tempo. And 1. E and a 2, E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 1, 2 E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 1. Cool. That's the first version. So practice it slow, get your check pattern going, keep it even the whole way, and then to crescendo on any roll, you're slightly going to lift up the tips of your sticks. And that is a wrist and arm motion. So the wrist has to kind of be flexible up. It's not going to be primarily wrist. I don't want to see this. That's a good way to have a bad tone when you're playing a roll. You want to get the arm as sort of the primary motion from here. I like to think of it a little bit from here. You can also think of it from here if that's how you play. We can talk about that a little bit more too, because there's options, and I'm not here to tell you that this is the best way to play, but I'm kind of here to give you some basics and some foundational things that are important. So if you're playing a bounce stroke, you're going to want the arm to be the main source. Okay? That's the main thing. The wrist needs to be relaxed and flexible too, because as the arm comes up, that wrist kind of moves with it. They move together. It's like dribbling a basketball. When the arm comes up, the wrist is just kind of like this relaxed end of a whip sort of thing that's happening. Okay? So have you ever been roller skating and they do the whip with everyone like grabbing onto each other and they go around, and then you're the person in the back that's just hanging on. That's sort of how the wrist is in this motion. So to crescendo, you're picking it up higher. The higher the stick goes, the more weight you can add to the stroke with your arm, and the louder it gets. Okay? So anytime we crescendo for any of these rolls, I want you to think about that. Starting on the and, this is a lot like a 7-stroke roll, also in rudimental drummings, 10s and 11s. They can have these delayed starts, and you're going to start the roll 1/16th note later, but then squeeze the same number of notes into less time. So your rhythm has to change a little bit. It's not straight 16th notes anymore, okay? And there's different ways to write this, and there's different ways to think about it. The two big ways are as 4/16th notes followed by a triplet. So it could look like this. As your skeleton for the roll. Okay. It would be your left hand here. And then the final hit would be here. So that's one way that is commonly used to talk about how to start this roll on an and. That's the skeleton the hands do. This is where it speeds up a little bit to squeeze those notes in, okay? But it's also not perfectly written or performed this way. If you were to listen to a really good rudimental drummer, it's not definitively played it's not so strictly connected to that rhythm. So the exercise we're going to use right now takes those 7 hits and it's going to write it as a 7-lit. So it's going to be 7 notes squeezed into, you know, those beats of the measure. All right. And when I do it this way, when it's written this way, to me visually, it just shows here's the clump of notes, it's 7, and you have the freedom to speed up where you want to musically, because it shouldn't be da 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 da. It shouldn't be perfectly regimented that way. So it's going to be a little bit more like you can hear that I started to increase that tempo a little bit of a different way every time. It wasn't exactly the same, and that's okay. That gives you musical freedom and musical decision. And if you want to be an advanced player thinking at an elite level, because even if our hands aren't there yet, even if we're not performing at an elite level yet, we have to be able to think at that level to get there eventually, okay? So this, I like to say hairy hippopotamus as a fun way to count a 7-lit. If you have other ways, put them in the comments for us to share with everybody. Different fun ways that you count 7s. I like to say hairy hippopotamus. And you just speed it up towards the end a little bit here. So this exercise would sound like this. Here's our tempo. And 1. Don't forget the crescendo. All right, so that is the other very common way you'll see a 15-stroke roll, and they're really pretty close 50-50 the way I see them out. Starting on an E, starting on an and. You got to know how to do both. And if you're not putting it in repertoire, it just builds better musicality if you can do both, if you can execute both ways, if you can learn how do you flex and flow a tempo, but then when you accent, you're back in time. It's a really important skill to be able to have as a musician. So those are the 2 main exercises for 15-stroke roll. Now, if you want to go back in time and learn a skill that in some ways has been lost we're going to break this roll down. Okay, we're going to start incredibly slow. We're going to use the 16th note, straight 16th note check pattern for our rhythm. And we're going to slowly build this up faster and faster. Okay, as we build this, you're always lifting the sticks up as high as you have time to get them. So as you get faster, we'll have less time and the sticks will stay lower and lower and lower. And then as you slow down, we'll slow down by picking those tips of the sticks up higher. And as you pick them up higher, it's going to help you slow down. It's going to slow you down on purpose. All right, so here's a 15-stroke roll. Lift those tips up as you slow down. So that's a traditional breakdown of a 15-stroke roll, and anytime you do one of those things, they're so good for your hand development, for your chop development, for your stick control. I like to say it's the ultimate stick control exercise because you're going from arm strokes to wrist strokes to bouncing to working on that finger control, and then all the way back through to the slow stuff, and doing it seamlessly and smoothly. It's so good for your chops. So don't worry about what your fastest tempo is, okay? Use the first two exercises as a way to build your speed a little bit, to build your ability to play this with a little bit of relaxation at those fast speeds, and then it'll make your fastest on the breakdown a little bit faster. But don't spend too much time practicing at a fast tempo where you don't have control, you don't have good sound quality, you don't have a little bit of relaxation, all right? Because if you're building tension, usually the other things will go away too. You'll lose your sound quality, you'll lose your stick control. And when you start practicing in that state too much, that's when bad habits start being formed, okay? And we want to practice in a way where we don't create bad habits. Because if we do, then we have to break them. And it takes 7 times longer to break bad habits. In fact, I read an article once that talked about the amount of times you need to repeat something. And it was an article for musicians that were part of this study. And they found that you have to do something 7 times to fix a bad habit that was created. So if you played flams wrong 100 times and it was created as a muscle memory, you had to play 700 flams to fix it. All right, so if we can just learn things slowly, properly, if we can practice with intention, we can learn these things faster because we're not worrying about bad habits. And I know I've built bad habits, and most of the students I work with were breaking bad habits in them. And it's possible, and there's ways to do it quicker. So hope this helps you. Put in the comments if you want to see anything else for snare drum chop building. I like to do it with the traditional rudimental drumming approach. So I want to make some videos that will help you out. Subscribe so you don't miss another one, and keep drumming. See you next time.